We are now live.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Asheville Transit Committee meeting, September 17th, 2024. We meet on the third Tuesday of the month, virtually from 5 to 7 p.m. The Transit Committee is a volunteer citizen board designed to offer input and guidance to the Asheville Transit System and City Council. We do not set or change routes, control Asheville's transit budget, or have authority over staff, drivers, or the management company. We are a group of citizens like you who are here to ensure community concerns are taken into consideration when setting public transit policy. At this time, I'll go ahead and go through the agenda, the roll call. I am your chairman, Harvey Harold. Sandy Aldridge. Sandy Aldridge. Elaine Barnes. Come on in, Elaine. Elaine Barnes. Joseph Chesler.
Yeah, I'm present here, Harvey.
Glad to see you, Joe. Bill Loftus.
Present.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Harvey.
Back. Glad you back.
Choke you up, isn't it?
I tell you, it hurts to laugh. I am sick. I'm trying to get through this.
I'm sorry.
Colin Kenton.
I'm here, Harvey.
Thank you, Colin. Glad you're here. Carol Wheeler.
Present.
There you are. Glad you're here, Carol. Thank you. We do have a quorum today. Staff, Jessica Morris.
Hey, everybody.
Okay, I'm glad you showed your face, Jessica. I would like for all of the staff to please show their faces. We have some new people in our midst, and I would like for the committee members to see who you are. That's Jessica. Thank you for being here today, Jessica. Amber Wagner.
Here, Harvey.
Thank you, Amber. Christopher Whitlock.
Present, Harvey.
There's Chris. Christina Harris.
Hello, I'm here.
There's Christina. Glad to see you, Christina.
Glad to see you as well.
All right. Nicole Hart.
Present.
There's Superwoman. I'm trying not to laugh now. Oh, my goodness. Ooh, hold on, hard. Katie Mullen.
That's me. Here.
Glad to see you again, Katie. Keith Sanders.
Keith Sanders is present. Thank you very much, Harvey.
I see you trying to play on the down low today without that time.
Good evening.
All right. Glad you're here, Keith.
Thank you.
LaShawn Abraham.
I'm here.
There's LaShawn. Good to see you, LaShawn. All right. Danielle Aiken.
Hey, Harvey, I'm here.
Good. There you are. So you got riding. All right. Thank everyone for being here today. At this time, we'll go over the review and approval of the agenda and the minutes. September 17th, 2024 agenda. May I have a motion to accept the minutes agenda as written? The agenda as written. May I have a motion to accept?
I'll move. Harvey, I want to thank you and Chris for accepting the amended agenda. That's really helpful.
Glad to do it, Joe. Glad to do it. We make it right. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Kara. Okay, Harvey Harrell, yay. Sandy Aldridge is not here. Lane Barnes. She hasn't got in yet. Joseph Chesler.
That's an aye.
Thank you, Joe. Bill Loftus.
Aye.
Thank you, Bill. Colin Kenton.
Aye.
Colin. Carol Wheeler.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, August 20th, 2024 minutes. May I have a motion to accept the minutes? May I have a motion to accept the
So
minutes?
moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, Harvey Harrell, yay. Joseph Chesler,
Yay.
Bill Loftus,
Yay.
Colin Kenton,
Yay.
Carol Wheeler.
Yay.
Thank y'all. We did have some public comment, but Carmen, she's not ready for us yet, but we'll get to her at a later date. At this time, Nicole, are you ready to read Elise's email?
Yes, sir, I'm ready.
Okay, you go right ahead.
From Elise Martyr, public comment. Hello, Chair Harold and members of the Transit Committee. I understand that the City Council is scheduled to vote on September 24th regarding the acceptance of $1.3 million in federal transit funds, which were rescinded from the county. While it's unclear whether the council's vote will also determine the allocation of these funds, I have reviewed the staff recommendations in today's agenda and would like to share my thoughts, particularly on the proposed implementation of a mobile fare payment system. While mobile fare payment is a desirable feature for larger, well-established regional transit systems with high ridership, ART does not currently fit that bill. Mobile payment is not a priority in the Transit Master Plan, nor has it been a focus of local transit advocacy groups. Instead, the clear priority is improving the frequency of the S3 and S6 routes, an issue that has consistently been raised by riders and advocates alike. Given council members' trepidation about piloting increased frequency on the S3 and S6 routes due to the uncertainty of sustained funding, it does not seem prudent to invest in a mobile fare payment system with significant ongoing costs. The ongoing expense of such a system outweighs the cost of piloting peak hour frequency increases of the S3 and S6, which would more directly impact ridership and service quality. With last fiscal year's ridership at 1.5 million, the cost of implementing a mobile fare payment system, estimated at $250,000, with an annual expense of $90,000, does not appear financially justifiable at this time. Such an expenditure should be based on clear evidence that limited fare payment options are a significant barrier to ridership growth. If that's the case, partnering with local businesses like Ingalls to sell ticket booklets could be a cost-effective alternative. If the decision is made to proceed in this direction, I suggest a thorough comparison of available mobile fare platforms to ensure that we select a system that best meets our needs and our budget. Thank you for considering these points. I look forward to further discussion on the most effective use of these funds to enhance our transit system. Regards, Elise Martyr.
Thank you. Thank you, Elise, for your comments. Moving on, Joseph, he also sent in an email. Joseph, did you want to read your email or did you want to comment on it? Let's save your comments until Jessica is through with her presentation.
Prefer to wait until the agenda item under new business, Harvey. That's okay?
Yeah, that's what I asked you.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yes, thank you, Joseph. I appreciate that very much. Okay, Elaine has joined us. Glad you have joined us, Elaine. Glad you're here today.
You. I'm having some difficulties, but I'm with you now.
We knew that. We knew you would get on in there. Thank you, Elaine. Glad you're here. Yeah. Okay. Excuse me. All right, moving down to acknowledgments. The Art Employee Spotlight, Zacchaeus Williams, bus operator, is being recognized for his life-saving efforts and dedicated service to the community. I guess, Keith, that will be up to you to give him that award publicly.
Thank you very much, Harvey. Zacchaeus Williams is one of our newest bus operators, and I don't know if he's on this call, and if he is, if you can turn on his camera. If he's not on this call, we did make arrangements for him to join, so we can personally thank him for those life-saving actions, those rapid actions. And I want to thank Council Member Roney for acknowledging Mr. Williams, because without that acknowledgement, we would have never known. We have shared the employee spotlight with corporate. He will be featured in our corporate spotlight. During our next safety stand down, he'll be recognized in front of his peers and applauded. We certainly wish we could have seen his presence here today, but I will accept his award in absentia. But we certainly appreciate all that he's done, and great job, Zacchaeus. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Keith, for accepting Zacchaeus' honor in his honor.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, he's an exceptional young man. I met him myself. Yeah. Okay. Moving on down to new business. City of Asheville staffing update. Introduction of the new transit apprentice, Katie Mullen. Katie, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Hello, I'm Katie. Just started, as Harvey said, as the transit apprentice, working mostly with Chris and Amber. Started maybe 2 weeks ago or so. So yeah, this is obviously my first transit committee meeting, and I hope to join others, and I'm excited to be here. It's been fun.
Thank you. Amber, did you want to say anything?
I just wanted
Jessica.
I just wanted to welcome Katie. She just started September 3rd. She is our new transit apprentice. She is a recent graduate from UNC Asheville with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. She has extensive experience in customer service, and she has also been participating in the community as an Asheville Active Transportation Committee member. So she's involved and engaged, and now serving as the role of the transit apprentice for the city. It's a 1-year term, funded with assistance with NCDOT. They provide 90% of it. The city pays 10%. And some of her projects are going to be working on community engagement, as well as our priority project is our bus stop improvement project, which we've had some staffing vacancies. So we're really excited for Katie to roll up her sleeves and dig in on this project. And we really are excited to get you all involved and engaged in this process. And we will provide updates at the meetings about progress. So just quick welcome to Katie.
Thank you, Amber. Jessica, did you have anything you want to say?
No, sir.
Okay, thank you. Moving on down, RATP Dev staffing update. Introduction of the new safety manager, Sharice Glenn.
Yes, that is correct. Thank you very much, Harvey. And I hope Ms. Glenn is on this call to give us a quick hello. But I will introduce her. Sharice Glenn is our last and final member of our key personnel. So we are now 100% full of all of our key personnel vacancies. We had a nationwide and extremely exhaustive search for someone that had the certifications as well as the qualifications to fill the role of safety manager. Ms. Glenn has come from larger properties, MARTA and WMATA, and she got here as fast as she could. I told her there's no place like Asheville, but it was an easy sell. So we're certainly glad that she has chosen to come on board. She has an array of experiences, as I said, certifications. So we're certainly glad to have her, and she too is rolling up her sleeves and partnering with us to turn things around and continue our trend of safety. Ms. Glenn, are you on this call? Okay. Well, thank you very much, Harvey. We'll have an opportunity to meet her at the next Transit Committee meeting, if not before. Thank you.
Thank you. Glad we're fully staffed there. All right. I forgot to do this. Excuse me. I was wanting to ask, is our liaison here? Councilwoman Kim Roney, are you here today, Kim? I want to get everybody in. Kim?
Yes, here.
She was?
I don't think so. I don't think she's joined us yet.
Oh, okay. Okay. Hopefully she'll get in later on. Okay, moving on down. The S4N1 afternoon on time performance. Committee members, oh, hold it. No, it's not. I forgot. Jessica's up next. I got my little line in here. My vision.
Check.
Yeah. Now we'll hear from Jessica on the rescinded county transit funds.
Okay. Hold on. I'm going to share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure I got this. All right. Okay.
While you're loading the screen, I'll just note that this is Kim. I figured out how to unmute the call, but I am on the meeting today.
Oh,
there
okay.
you are. Glad you're here, Kim.
Okay, so thank you, everybody. I'm Jessica Morris. I'm the Assistant Director of the Transportation Department. So there's probably some folks on here that I haven't met yet. But Amber and I work very closely together on all things transit. And she helped with this presentation this afternoon. And so I'm just going to jump right into it with the key takeaways, which are just kind of the most important points that we want to highlight for this presentation. And what we wanted to do to kind of set this conversation up is just have some kind of background, which is related to our funding, our current funding situation. We get funds from a whole bunch of different sources, including federal funding. We have had our funding from the federal government side go down since about 2015. And I'll have some graphs and stuff to talk about that, but that's one of our major funding sources, and we've experienced decreases in that funding source. And as you know, with everything, we have rising costs for both our operations, for bus purchases. Pretty much everything has gone up in cost. So with that reduced federal funding coming in, it's really had an impact on our ability to not only invest in the fleet, but invest in the operations itself, invest in our own transit staffing and things of that nature. So funding is definitely a very important thing that we have to keep in mind constantly. And to that end, we are going to be embarking on a comprehensive operational assessment, which I think you guys have heard quite a bit about. And it's not a new transit master plan. It is looking at our current operations system and looking at the recommendations from the transit master plan. And it will assess our current system and provide recommendations, both short-term recommendations and long-term recommendations, to help improve our efficiency and show that we really need to align our resources and our service demands and try to get the most we can for every dollar we have. We are very fortunate that Buncombe County has decided that they would approve a rescission of some of their federal funds to the city. And I'll go into detail about that, but we are very grateful to the county for providing us some additional funding for this fiscal year. And so, we need to be mindful about potential service delivery, recommendations for how to use that funding, equipment recommendations for how to use that funding, and keeping in mind that we're about to start our comprehensive operations analysis. We want to be cognizant of all of those things that are at play when we're thinking about how to best program these funds that Buncombe County is providing. Just a quick reminder overview. Our city general fund, as well as the parking fund, contribute more than 60% of all of the funding that is used to operate not just the ART system, the fixed route system, but also our ADA paratransit system, which we contract with Buncombe County to provide. Current funding is not sufficient to continue to maintain our existing levels of service as costs continue to rise. And we have had to use one-time ARPA funds the last couple of years, to fill very significant gaps in our transit fund. And so there are no longer any more ARPA funds or CARES Act funds or any of those one-time grant funds that we received as a result of COVID. Those are all completely tapped out. Our parking fund, which has its own significant needs, has contributed over $7 million to transit since 2019. And as I mentioned, the city's share of our dedicated federal grant funding has decreased over the years. And that is directly tied to a change that our metropolitan planning organization made with regards to the formula that's used to divvy out those funds that come into our region. And it's had a significant impact on our budget. This graph might be a little hard to read. The blue line is the city of Asheville. The other lines are the other agencies that get that federal funding. And what this graph is trying to indicate is that between 2015 and now, you can see the blue line decreases pretty rapidly between about 2015 and 2018. And that's the result of that formula change, where our portion went down. Other agencies, including Buncombe County, Haywood County, and Henderson County, their portions went up. And so now our portion is starting to get back to where it was in about 2017, 2016. And that's really only because the overall pot got bigger. So you can see how substantially our amount of funding from the federal side went down with that formula change. And I promise all this will come together at the end. But just a quick overview of our transit fleet. We have 35 buses. More than half of those are over 500,000 miles or 12 years old, which is basically means that those buses really should have been retired and replaced. And so you don't want to have half of your fleet, especially when you have a small fleet, you don't want to have half of your fleet basically past its useful life. Further complicating our fleet situation are that we've got 5 Proterra buses. I don't know how many are working at the moment, but it's been anywhere from 0 to 5. Most of the time, it seems like we've only got 2 of them that we're able to use. And then even with that, we have limited range and can only run those buses several hours a day instead of all day long. And so it just further strains the overall system, puts more miles on every other bus, and really becomes a challenge for our transit operator. Makes everything a lot more complex for the operations and maintenance side when we've got a fleet that's really not in a healthy, usable, and functioning manner. And as you know, those are the city purchases the buses, we provide them to the transit contractor. So they're kind of stuck with what we give them. And so, you know, our goal is that we really want to try to buy 4 or 5 buses every year so that we're regularly replacing and retiring buses. We're not hanging on to buses and spending even more money on maintaining them, which we've had to do the last couple of years. We've had to add additional funds because we're taking care of fixing and paying for fixing really old buses that should have been retired long ago. So it's an issue for us. Reminder, we're about to embark on our comprehensive operations assessment. The closing date for those proposals was today. Amber was just telling me that we've gotten a handful of proposals that we'll be going through. And overall, we are looking to this assessment to help us identify our strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities. It is going to take a very, very, very deep dive into our schedules, our ridership, our peak times, and help us hopefully better balance our routes and our demand, and also align it with the resources that we have. We also are in the seventh year of an 8-year contract with our current operations and maintenance contractor, RATP Dev. So as you know, we're going to be going out to bid soon for a new operations and maintenance contract. And so having this COA done at this time is really going to be useful for that process as well. So we had proposals were submitted today. Our next step would be to go through all of those and score them, and then hopefully select a consultant to help us kick that project off in this fall. So pretty much in the next couple months, we will be bringing a contract approval for contract execution forward to council in the coming future, near term. And then our intention is to have it completed in early summer of 2025. So all of that is kind of the lead in to the real conversation here, which is to talk about the funding that Buncombe County has graciously rescinded to us. They had a few things that they wanted us to do with this money. And some of it is really accounting for things that we already have been doing. And that includes like the first bullet, which is talking about using some of the money that they're rescinding to us to cover what we normally would get from them for support, funding support for the new Leicester Highway extension and support that they provide for the Route 170. So that kind of comes off the top, so to speak, of the 1.34 million that they are rescinding to us. And they're just saying that we're already accounting for that in that total. The second bullet is essentially they're asking us to trade with them some money that we got from a different funding source. They would like to have that. They would like to have the $138,000 that we were awarded under 5310 and trade that for the 5307 money that they're rescinding. So that kind of comes off the top of the 1.3 million as well. And then the last two are more operational, both of which have a cost impact. But the third bullet is something they want us to evaluate, and we have not yet done so, but plan to in the near future. They would like us to look at a change to our WE2 route that would extend our route about a mile, reduce their route by their Trailblazer route by the same, and essentially move that transfer point so that they can have a safer turnaround where those two routes meet. So that's something that we're going to look into. It does have a budgetary impact for us, although it's hopefully a modest one. And then the fourth bullet is something that we've all are very familiar with this conversation, and we'll talk more about it today, but the commissioners wanted us to evaluate increased trip frequency for the southern routes of the ART system. So this table is kind of the summary of what I just stated, but the total rescission amount for this fiscal year that they have committed to and approved is the 1.374 million. The 268,000 is what they would have already provided to us in support using the same funding source, same process of rescinding 5307 money to us, the city, to help pay for their portion of the 170 and the new Leicester Highway route that was extended. And then the 138,000, that row is the trade between the two funding sources that I spoke of. So all of that is just to show that the 1.374 million is not completely positive new revenue that we weren't expecting. Really, our total new funding is 967,000, which is still a really very generous amount of funds to provide to the city. So this slide is, and I'll just note that this presentation was the same presentation that staff provided to council members during the check-in meetings that staff have with council occasionally on particular subjects. So this presentation is the exact same one we provided to council and got some council feedback on it and wanted to get feedback from the transit committee. So we, the council is going to be looking on Tuesday to accept the money that Buncombe County is rescinding to the city and put it into the budget, but they're not actually being asked to make any, to approve any kind of expenditures or approve how the money is going to be spent. They're just, on Tuesday night at the council meeting, it's just going to be the act of accepting the money that Buncombe County has provided. But we also knew that the council members wanted to know from staff what we thought we could do with the money, or what we thought would be the best use of the funds that would be coming from the county. And so we put together some information. I think all of us feel pretty strongly about our fleet needs. And so our primary recommendation is recommendation number 1, and that is to use a significant amount of that 967 towards adding one more bus to our next bus purchase. That would mean that when we go to council in October or November to ask for approval to buy more buses, we'll be asking for to be able to purchase 4 buses instead of 3 buses, which is a huge help, and it helps us meet our goal, at least for this year, of wanting to replace or to purchase 4 new buses. The second recommendation is one that we came up with because we know that there's a lot of demand and a lot of desire to expand service on the southern routes. We all want to make it full-time, double frequency or more, but not having a confirmed commitment that's longstanding and continuous. We are, from a staff perspective, trying to balance all these things. And so our recommendation to council was to do a 6-month pilot of adding 2 trips in the morning and 2 trips in the evening to the S3. And that estimated cost is I know it looks like not a huge number, and it's not, 62,000, but that's 6 months for 4 trips. And it's not including any of the real like overhead costs or administrative costs that also come with making that more trips per day, or doing it to both routes. So it's looks like a small number, but it quickly escalates if you continue to add more trips and more service. So, this was an attempt to try to meet, have a compromise, if you will, to say, let's do this. We know that we need it, but we need to be cautious about our funding situation, particularly when we've got our comprehensive operations analysis that'll be underway soon, as well as a brand new transit contract. And it's very likely that our costs will just continue to escalate. So we're trying to be cautious. And I know that that's not what the committee has recommended, and it's completely understood. The third recommendation is really something that's up for, all of it's up for discussion, but the recommendation number 3, that's something that I know the committee has talked about maybe several years ago. It's been a while, but we did do a study on different mobile payment technologies several years ago with a grant that we got. And it may not be the highest priority for staff. Like there's also a lot of other needs, like a bus wash is something that we desperately need, as well as just more buses in general. So this was something that we threw out to the council members because we thought, well, if there's a desire to program all of the funds that the county is providing, then this could be something to look at because it could be a benefit to current riders. It's not necessarily meant to drive ridership higher. It's mostly meant to make it easier for people who are currently riding, and it's very challenging to purchase fares. So, there's a ton of other options we can consider. Honestly, probably the most prudent one from a financial standpoint might just be to hold on to it, because it's likely that we're going to have a lot more costs related to fixing old buses come the end of the fiscal year. So just saving it is also an option that we considered and talked a lot about with the council members. I'm almost done here, and then we can jump into questions and conversation. So our next steps are going to the council meeting next Tuesday to accept the 1.37 million. And the council's also being asked to budget some of that into capital and then some of that into operating funds, but they're not actually going to be approving the specific expenditures of those funds. Any future purchase or use of those funds would have to come back to council for a separate action anyways. So even if everybody says, yeah, let's use it to buy some of it to buy a bus, we still have to go back to council to have that authorized separately. The second step is kind of going back to the beginning of this presentation where we were talking about this overall formula that changed at the MPO level that had a big impact on our city transit revenue. We have initiated conversations with the MPO and with the county about, can we revisit that formula, because it's really had a huge impact on us, and we'd like to see if there's willingness to revisit that and maybe change that formula in a way that would provide more dedicated funding to the city. And I do think that there has been positive indications of willingness to do that. It would be more efficient than having an annual conversation about rescinding money. So we had a meeting with the county yesterday, actually, and it was very positive, and we'll be having further conversations with them as well as the MPO about that formula. And then separately, we'll be bringing forward the contract approval for the consulting firm that ultimately gets selected for the comprehensive operations assessment. And so this is just a repeat of the key takeaways slide from the beginning, essentially saying that our funding is getting real tight, tighter by the day. And we have invested a lot of funding in expanding service, and we've, I think, neglected spending what we need to on our fleet. And we all also know that we need a new garage desperately, and that is something that we have invested zero in. So trying to balance all sides of this equation is what we're trying to do, and the COA will look at all of those things and help us understand our financial picture better. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm happy to answer any questions, but we really want to hear from you guys. We'll report back to the council on Tuesday the key takeaways from what the committee has said. And I will open up the floor to any questions or comments.
Colin had his hand up first, and then we'll go to Joseph.
Go for it.
Thanks, Jessica. Good presentation. I appreciate all the information. Starting from the top, the MPO changing the formula. The MPO are regional leaders. Well, I mean, was this a purely political reason? I mean, that's a significant change based on the graph. I mean, what was it? Did they need more money for I-26? What was the basis for that? If it doesn't take too long.
Looks like we lost Jessica.
Yeah. She did not like my question.
No, it wasn't.
I can provide a little background. I wasn't here when this occurred, but what we know is that this money is Federal Transit Administration money. We're the direct recipient of it. It is not going to I-26. This was the local stakeholders, the Henderson County, Haywood, and Buncombe County, and the city of Asheville wanted to look at the allocation of how the funds are distributed and They come in through a distribution model with FTA, And then the MPO is the level where it's distributed out.
Right.
And there was a study done in 2016 with 9 options. All the entities were able to vote on it. And the particular allocation model that was chosen increased funds for services in other areas where it impacted the city of Asheville. There was an incremental approach to not, completely drop us by $1 million in funding. It occurred within 2 to 3 years, but those are some of the realities of what happened.
I mean,
So
did,
it increased funding for Buncombe County, Henderson, and Haywood County.
and I mean, was everybody aware that it was going to result in that kind of a significant decrease for Asheville Transit?
I believe, a lot of these scenarios were ran. I do not know if they looked at the long term. Then what also happened is with the new bipartisan infrastructure bill, funding was increased by 30 to 40% amongst the transit program for systems. So that was such a bigger influx of funds into our region. We've seen a 56% increase since 2015. But if you look at it in terms of the city of Asheville has only seen like a 19% increase, where others have seen larger. And that's that's due to the allocation model.
Yeah. And that was the other question, a follow-up on that was what, with the bipartisan transportation bill, I thought there was a significant increase potential for transit, and
we're just catching up.
Yeah,
yeah, we're not even at that level.
And then of the funds, this rescinded, slightly less than $1 million from that's FTA money.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have limitations on how it can be used? Can it only be used for capital? Can it be used for maintenance? What can it be used for, and what can it not be used for? And does it have a time limitation on it?
There
can you just put it in the bank and let it earn interest, subject to the clawback of earning interest on money?
The reason for the discussion of the rescission of funds is that there's a 5-year period of availability. So once there's an appropriation given by Congress for these funds, an entity has 5 years to obligate it with eligible expenses and a grant through FTA. So these particular grant funds are from their allocation from 17 and 18 that they did not obligate, nor did they have a spending plan to put in a grant. So they have rescinded those funds for us to utilize. The purposes and the eligibility of the funds, we have more flexibility due to the number of buses we operate. We have less than 100 buses at peak service. So we're able to we can use it for capital, which is at 80-20. You can use it for preventative maintenance, which is at 80-20. We utilize a capital cost of contracting, which is a tiered model to capitalize a portion of our contract. And then you also have operating that you can provide federal funds at a 50-50 match. So there's a lot of eligibility that can be utilized. And there is a time period though. So we need to be mindful of that. And now that we've increased and reconciled our processes with our grant management, we are tracking the allocations, and we are at the process and at the point right now that every year we have to obligate grant funds so they don't lapse, because a lot of what has occurred is the ARPA and the CARES funding was a big influx of funding that some of these systems in Buncombe County are still utilizing. So then they're not using their allocations. So they are utilizing their CARES and ARPA before their appropriation allocations.
Well, and just to add to that, so the same formula was used to divvy up the CARES funds and the ARPA funds.
Yeah.
So when those stimulus funds came, they got split out in the same formula as the regular money. But, and we have no, as a city, for art, we have no problem spending that money. We spend the money before, it's our service costs so much that it is not a problem for us to spend the grant funds. We spent our CARES Act money the same year we got it. We spent our ARPA funds, I think, over a couple of years. But these smaller transit agencies, their whole operation costs like 1/10 or 1/20 of what ours does. And so the combination of the formula change plus all of the additional stimulus funding, like they don't have operations enough to spend the money. They don't have big enough operations. They don't have enough match funds to spend the money. And so the change was made, and I think it was mostly political, although I wasn't here.
Yeah.
It's the impacts of that are now being very dramatically felt and recognized. And I think there is kind of a recognition now that if you can't spend your money, then that's an issue, because the goal here is to provide service, and we can provide more. And if other agencies want to provide more and make their systems bigger, then they have the money to do it, but they're not spending it. So the rescission is because that funding will go away if it doesn't get spent. And so Buncombe County is like, okay, well, we can't spend this. It's already 5 years old. Here, City of Asheville, we know you can spend it immediately. And so that's great. It benefits us. But from a planning perspective, a budgeting perspective, it would be nice if we can rectify the overall allocation so that we're not going through an annual process and having like an annual negotiation, if you will.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Colin. Joseph?
Yes, thank you, Harvey. And thank you, Jessica and Amber, for your response to our transit working group comments. We have there's three of us that sit on the MMTC that provided a comment to these recommendations, which many of you received yesterday or last night. I appreciate the explanation of these changes in your funding, which all we really are hoping for is more dialogue before these recommendations are realized. And I think you've opened the door for that, and we look forward to continued dialogue in hopes that we can match our expectations, if you will, between what the transit working group wants to see versus staff needs. We can't begin to understand fully the challenges that you have on a daily basis based on some of the comments you made today with regard to maintenance and operation of an aging fleet and various other things. But the recommendations that were shown as being related to this new funding source seemed a bit misleading. Maybe that's not the right word, but coupled with at least Marty's comments, which I think were spot on regarding the mobile fare payment system, I think that there are that might in objectives. The one thing that I'd like to focus on a little bit is the additional cost for one additional bus, which clearly just continues the status quo with regard to maintaining your fleet. Our hope, I think I can say unilaterally, is our hope is that we will start to experiment with maybe smaller buses that are have a greater range within the electric fleet and might achieve um, better success in congested urban areas like downtown, where we might see a system, as we've discussed in theory, a downtown circulator idea where you connect the spoke arrangement of routes so that a downtown circulator could get folks to points of interest and work sites much more efficiently than having to come back to the transit center in order to go a different direction in the city. That could be achieved from the limited research we've done. That could be achieved for less than a lot less than the 655,000 it would take for one diesel bus. But our research is limited. We don't have the expertise nor the experience that you do in staff and with your COA consultant. And so we hope that that option or others like it will continue to maybe morph out of that analysis. I did have a couple of questions though. Is the formula for the dedicated FTA funds, the non-competitive funds, is that principally a population-based formula, or as you said, is it purely political in origin? Maybe that's a loaded question, but
so the answer is yes to both. So the federal, and this is very similar for other kinds of federal funding, like affordable housing funding. So CDBG might be something you've heard of. It's very similar situation where the federal government divvies up among the states using a formula based on mostly on population. So they take $1 zillion and they divvy it up to states and they divvy it up to urban areas, mostly based on population. And then from there, it's either the state further divvies it up to cities or counties or whomever, or the MPOs are responsible for divvying it up. And I think I don't want to say most, but our experience, and I think maybe the majority of places, then they use a formula that takes into account not only population, but it takes into account ridership, and it takes into account the revenue miles, so like the number of miles you're going, and to try to base it on the size of the system and the number of folks that are using it. And the MPOs, the change that was made took out the data point about revenue miles. And the purpose of that was, I think, to in the minds of the members that voted, I'm only imagining that there was a desire to try to give more funds to the smaller agencies because they have less funds in general. But what that did was it didn't fully, it basically took money from the city and the city system at the expense of the users. And I think if in their argument, it's like, well, the city has a whole lot more money in general. They could just find other sources. And that's not untrue, but to kind of manipulate the formula or change the formula to take out some of the key parts of the equation has a significant impact. So hopefully that answers your question. It's a little bit of both.
Yeah, it does. I'm very excited to hear that the door seems to be open to renegotiate that formula with the MPO, as you pointed out. That's really all I had. We simply would like to learn about these kinds of recommendations sooner in the process. I presume the council needs to accept these funds before the end of the fiscal year. Is that not correct?
Yes. And one of the things that we talked to the county about was, thank you so much for these funds. It would have been really cool if we could have had this conversation like in January, so that we could have budgeted the funds into the budget process but it was, I think, it's been an ongoing conversation, and the timing was such that they said, okay, we will rescind these funds to you, but that final announcement of that didn't happen till July. Our budget was already approved. We've asked them, like, okay, if this is something you guys want to think about doing this coming year, let's have that conversation starting now so we can count for it in our upcoming budget process for next year. And they're very, very amenable to that. And so, ultimately the goal would be to not have to have that ongoing conversation every year. But in the meantime, we will be talking with them about the funds that they have that will be lapsing next year. We'll have that conversation way earlier in the game, which will allow us to have conversations with you guys way earlier. So we want to accept them as soon as possible so that we can start spending them too. So
great.
And I'd like to note, this is 2 years of funds that the county is rescinding. And so proceeding and however the process is, the discussions will be based probably on a year at a time, which is really challenging to plan sustainability of that. And also depending on their other funding sources. I believe they've received some decreases in funding as well that they're going to have to take a look at to see what they're going to do to, utilize their funding to their extent. So this was 2 years of funding, and we're hopeful and optimistic that we can start the discussion, and they've committed to that we can start the discussion earlier than this time.
Well, congratulations, and we look forward to further dialogue on this and other use of funds. Harvey, if I may, personal privilege, Bill Loftus is the other member of our transit working group. May I defer to him for a few minutes before we get back on the other agenda or other speakers?
Well, we have people that want to ask a question. We'll get to Bill. I think he might be the third person in line.
I would like him to go now, if I may request that, but I'll defer to you.
Okay. Well, Bill hadn't been here in a while. Let's go ahead and hear from Bill. And Carol, you'll be right after Bill. And then Colin.
Thank you, Harvey. And I hate to jump in, Joe, but anyway, I wanted to ask, is there a time frame on when we decide how to use the $967,000?
Yes and no. I mean, council and Councilwoman Roney, please feel free to jump in. When we talked with the council members at check-ins, and these check-ins are separate meetings, and so we're just doing these check-ins to kind of get a sense of and get some feedback and a sense of what council members might be thinking or feeling about the conversation. We showed them this information. I felt like there was pretty strong consensus about the desire to add one more bus to the bus purchase. That seemed to be pretty uniform throughout our meetings. The other stuff was less consensus, good conversation. And so, our approach was what we're thinking was we would bring forward the request to purchase the next set of buses at the late October meeting or the November meeting of council. The remainder of it, though, I think is still something that we could talk about. If we are to do a pilot or add service to the S3 or the S6, though, we need to make that decision relatively soon, because there is an uptime that, and that's not the right word, but a preparation time that RATP Dev will have to have in order to do the new driver schedules to account for that new service. It's not changing the schedules of the service, although we'll have to do that and reprint some maps and stuff for the S3 if we go that way. But we need to decide if we're going to add service, then we need to figure that out soon. The remainder of it, we don't have to decide anything now or anytime real soon. Does that help?
This is Councilmember Roney. Just as far as the process, thank you, Jessica, for giving us an update on the timeline. So just for some additional clarity, because the check-ins are 2 members of council and the mayor at a time, and there aren't any minutes, it's really hard to document like what the consensus would be, or to refer back to it anyway. So one of the things that I just wanted to name too is that we have, multiple advocacy areas, documented surveys of transit riders, and additionally there's advocacy to get good paying jobs and second chance employer jobs with extended routes to go to cover Inca Candler service, which is in fiscal year 4 of the Transit Master Plan. And just a technical note that it's part of the advocacy is that the S3, S6 service supports that connective tissue of the Inca Candler. So when we're talking about S3, it's not just for South Asheville routes, it's also connecting the future of the Ferry Road neighborhood with almost 700 apartments and homes, along with employment corridor. So just some of the big picture parts. The other thing that I would say is from my check-in is the main point of advocacy I had was that this body at minimum be able to weigh in, and hopefully our Multimodal Transportation Commission as well.
Thank you. And so Jessica, back to answer your question, yeah, that was helpful on the timeline. It's what I took from it is that the most urgent thing that has to be decided is whether or not you do the 6-month pilot. Just for operational reasons, it takes a startup to make that happen. So otherwise, there is not a deadline, as I understand it, what I took you to say. There might be a relationship to the additional bus purchases that's already outlined in the budget that might reflect timing. I would say that I know a lot of us in this call are anxious to see bus type alternatives studied before we start investing in new capital, because there's a lot of us that realize that there might be some other options than just the same old big bus that we have in the fleet. We can look at the ridership reports that you guys provide us and see that there's a vast difference in ridership by route, which suggests different fuels, different sizes, all that kind of stuff. So, so that gets me to a point it's basically a second to Joe, but it's a little bit more of a direct ask. We definitely want to be engaged in how we spend this money. And what I don't expect an answer right now, but I do expect the ask is, can you come back to us and tell us how you can engage our committee on how to allocate this money? We would like to be involved is the point, and we want to know how you can engage us. And so that's the ask to you. If you can give us that, we don't have to wait for another meeting, but that's one ask.
Yeah, if I might, as far as like as your liaison, I know you have a transit retreat coming up, and having a section on fleet, the state of the current fleet and where we're headed could be a really good point to dig into before making a formal recommendation. For example, I know when we were short on buses before, there were 4 routes that could be managed by a smaller vehicle. But I remember that part of that cascading issue is if a bus goes down on a fleet that can't be handled by a smaller vehicle, then you don't have as much flexibility. Another thing that might help for Jessica to be able to weigh in on is this timeliness factor. If the funds were meant to be spent down in 5 years, that timeline seems to have already passed. But one of the reasons why we're eligible for this amount of funding in the Asheville metro region for the MPO is because of the population and fixed route service that Asheville has. So I'm imagining that part of the reason we have a more flexible timeline is because we'll be internally cascading these funds so that we don't have to send them back. Is that correct?
Right. Yes. Yeah. But I think that maybe we need to do a better job at educating about the fleet and the constraints, and the COA is going to dive into that as well. But I think one, there's some really important things that folks need to realize about fleet. One is that it's the biggest cost is the driver. 80% of the ongoing cost is the driver. Yes, the bus is expensive, but most of it is the driver. So no matter if you're driving a passenger car or a 60-foot articulating bus, it's the same operating cost, right? So when you have a really small fleet, which we do, you want to have interchangeability of buses for maintenance, for preventative maintenance. So if we've got to take a couple buses out to do PMs and you got to deploy other buses to other routes, like it's not, some routes only have X amount of ridership. There's also interlining. There's a lot of things that come into play. And so it's not just like you mix and match and have all these different size buses, especially when the driving cost is the operator. So I think there's a lot of good information out there that maybe the transit committee could look at, and we're going to look at fleet options, but it's not like, this route, we could use a smaller bus. It's way more complex than that. And I think that gets overlooked. And then, as far as the timeline, I mean, we need to buy buses. We need vehicles. And so, I don't think that staff is going to wait to bring forward a request to buy buses, whether that's 3 buses or 4 buses. I think that's up to the council to decide. I think the extent to which we're asking for feedback this is the feedback time. It's not necessarily the only time, but we've already gotten a lot of really great feedback about the desire is to add service. Like, we know that, right? So, our job is to listen, guide, and provide our best recommendation. You guys can provide feedback and you can provide your recommendation. We bring that to council and then council decides. That doesn't necessarily mean that that staff will agree with what a committee or a commission has recommended, but it's our responsibility to at least inform the council that this is staff's recommendation. This is what we heard from the committee, and they may be in conflict with each other. And then it's council's decision to make which direction to go. So I would say today is one of your opportunities. We can bring it back to another meeting, but I don't know that our recommendation would change, especially from the bus perspective. And the recommendation number 2, I don't see staff we're not going to say, okay, yes, we think we can definitely triple this. I think that would put us in an even more precarious financial position. So
Jessica, I do have a question about just like process here. I'm hearing that if a recommendation was going to be made, even the next transit committee meeting might be too late, but that it is okay to make, differing recommendations. It seems like there's some information that's not fully available to the transit committee in order for them to make a recommendation. For example, I remember from our check-in, there was a conversation about a threshold, and I still am unclear on that one, but maybe that would help the transit committee to decipher why not do 6 routes on the S3? Why is it 4? And when does that trigger of a different cost kick in? Because one of the things we were asking about at our check-in was why not spread the service enhancements to get more evening service hours or Sunday service hours? There was a threshold that is unclear.
Right. The short answer is that the number of trips that we've recommended is the number that keeps us from having to pay for RATP to add more drivers. It keeps us from needing another bus. It's really more about the staffing of the operation. So the 4 additional trips they can absorb into their current staffing level. And I don't, and Amber or Keith, if you have more detail on what that trigger is to where you go into that next need to hire more people, that this is the level that we felt comfortable with without having to then kind of escalate to the next level of costs, and being able to absorb into the current staffing.
And I think a lot of it there is that threshold and what happens. And I would have to go back to look at the research that we did with Keith. But we are in a really precarious state with the fleet. And I believe we discussed this in November as well. And this, we are currently 50% of the fleet has over 500,000 miles. We have about 20, and with the Proterras, we've got about 20% out of service due to just old age fleet. Sometimes it's 15, sometimes it's 20, but if we continue to run the miles on the fleet, we're going to get ourselves in a situation in a year or two of all we're doing is adding to the fleet. And we're going to get into a situation like we did when I started here, that we were unable to provide a base level service because we had vehicles that were down. So we're also trying to keep that in mind, which happened in 22. We were pulling trips off because it was the vicinity issue and the lack of availability of getting new buses in. It was really hard. And that was at the time when we had the Proterras, and some of them were still operational. So it is a challenge. We'd love to put more frequency on the routes and we'd like to see it. We'd also like to see how we can maximize and look at the existing route structure and see where we can able to align those resources and create that additional frequency, and the service delivery levels, as well as the type of vehicle and the type of service delivery. We're trying to be conservative with our approach. If we go to a higher level, there'll be additional costs with dispatchers, supervisors, as well as the cost of the fleet. We'd probably need to get another bus or have to be in consideration of that.
Thank you, Amber. Okay, Kara.
Hey, Harvey, I wasn't quite finished, if you don't mind.
Oh, my bad. Go ahead, Bill.
So, Jessica, your answer to my question, it sounded like, was that this is the engagement mechanism, our transit committee meetings. Is that it? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes, pretty much. We're looking for your feedback. We're also already have considered a lot of the feedback we've gotten. And so we're making our recommendations based on all of that, plus, the other needs that we know exist.
Okay, so just to relate it though, when we have a meeting like this and we see your recommendation, it's hard for us to register an opinion because it's essentially a yes/no question. I've had the same comment at MMTC. What we'd like to see is what is the long list of options that are being considered for the $967,000? Because without the options, it's almost impossible to render a yes or a no decision. So one way you can engage us, and you don't have to do it right now, but between now and the next meeting, is provide us with the long list. What were the 10 options or the short list, if you will? This is the recommendation. Usually there's many that precede it, and it gets sorted down through a process that's a synthesis process of how you finally come to a conclusion. It would help us if we saw what a longer list was, just so we've got something to go with, as opposed to just a yes or no.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, yeah, there's so many things, right? So at the end of the day, like we kind of have to choose something. And I guess we could come up with a short list, and it would be, even narrowing it down to that would be something that would take, not take time, but it would be hard for us to tell you the top 10.
Well, I get the reason I'm asking for that is that, I mean, these are all obviously valid things. I mean, it's not like we don't need them, but they're sort of patchwork things, right? They're all, we need buses, so a bus. We'd love to have paid. All these things are neat, but there's not a strategy behind it.
Right. Well, I think
the strategy
maybe we're not doing a good enough job communicating it. But I mean, honestly, Amber and I wanted to take all of it and put it towards buses. But what we thought would happen was that everyone would say, no, we really want service, and which is what has been said. And so what we were trying to do was say, okay, we're trying to meet multiple goals at one time.
Yeah, that's apparent. And
it is.
The theme of these calls always gets back to we need frequency.
And I think
one of these three has frequency, but it's a pilot. So my discomfort with this list is we've got close to $1 million to spend, but we're not striking hard at what we've said is our strategic need, which is frequency. So that's my reaction to the chart on the page right now.
And I think from a staff perception, and I know, Bill, we've discussed this, is we're looking at this as one-time funding. This money, there's not even $1 million, 900,000 that'll be even available for us to talk about or create a short list next year, likely. So when we look at it, trying to be mindful of that list that we're going to see of recommendations and service improvements from the comprehensive operation analysis, we're also going to be tasked with that and looking at that and what our community wants with public engagement. And when we look at the performance of our system, we're going to get a list of service enhancements and service improvements and some maybe route networking. But in terms of this, we really were trying to look at it from a one-time funding standpoint, because we have not received that level of commitment from Buncombe County to provide that. And with the unknowns of what we're going to see from the operations analysis, as well as the unknowns of some of those conditions that we're supposed to be looking at under the guise of the conditions we're accepting the funds, and not knowing what our contract costs are going to be for the future 26 and beyond, we were trying to take an approach that this is one-time funding capital that doesn't commit us to long-term operational, that possibly we can look at those operational efficiencies and expansions on the route network with the comprehensive operation analysis, where we'll all have more data points and guided discussion from a consultant and a team that can lead us in some of those and guide us on that path in terms of service enhancements. So we were trying to make a balanced, compromised approach on this. And I guess the next steps, we can provide the short list if that's where we're at, and what the request is. Or the long list.
Thank you, Amber. That all, Bill? Or you have some more?
No, thank you, y'all. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill, for being here today. Appreciate your input. Kara, and then Colin.
Thanks, Harvey. Thanks, Jessica and Amber, for all that detail, and I think some really good conversation from the committee. I just had a couple questions. First one's for Jessica. I just want to confirm what I heard, that for the MPO allocations, did you say that's based on ridership? So an increase in ridership would have a positive increase on our allocations for future?
Yes, a portion of the formula, I believe, does include ridership.
And revenue miles, and there's population density. There's multiple factors in how we receive the funds from FTA. And how we get it distributed and allocated amongst the region is they've taken revenue miles out. There's just a small tier, performance tier for revenue miles.
Is that formula available publicly?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Would you mind sending that one?
Yeah, we can do that. And we can send and provide for your reading, everyone's reading enjoyment, if they'd like, the study that the MPO did back in 2015, 2016, something of that nature, where they looked at the formula, they looked at different options of the formula, like how to there were 9 different options. And the one that was chosen was chosen, and it resulted in us getting less. But we can provide all of that. It might be helpful to see like the context for which that decision was made.
Yeah, and I'm kind of like just thinking here, like a 20% up in our ridership, is that like a 5% increase in the MPO formula, or how does those numbers work? I know there's a lot of variables and it won't be as clear cut as that, but just that's kind of information was the root cause of that question.
Yeah.
My follow-up question is, I know y'all said that adding 4 runs on the S3 is going to be $62K. What was the cost of that next level up? I know you said there would be additional costs with that added bus driver and logistics. Even would be great.
I'm going to have to defer to Amber, and it might be that we have to bring that up. I thought there was a transit committee meeting where we presented some of that information, but I could be mistaken.
I know we provided some additional information when we were looking at it initially, early on, and then when Keith joined in, he provided us additional tiers of that helped us when with Paul, Chris, and I did the analysis. So I can look at the additional information and I can provide follow-up information on that. I don't have it available right now, but I can provide that.
That would be great. And really my question was, at $62K, and with 4 runs, that's about like $15,000 per run at 11 runs a day for like a full day of just doubling service. And I get that it is not a 1-to-1 ratio. So curious about what that number is. That's putting us about at $170K.
You need to add a vehicle, because that would take up a vehicle the entire time.
Okay.
So it's our fleet resources. We are really going to come into a challenging time when we're putting more miles. We should normally be putting 40 to 50,000 miles. We're putting 70 to 80,000 miles on a bus, and their useful lives are 10 to 12 years, and we're eating buses up in 6. And it really is not a healthy fleet policy. So there needs to be more vehicles to spread the miles. So we're not just continually, utilizing the useful life too soon. We want to try to balance that and have a healthy fleet management policy And we're at about 60% right now of our replacement schedule on that four to five buses each year. A couple of years we've only done 2. There's been a couple of years that we haven't done any. So right now we have 2 that are budgeted locally, and the third is coming from 5339 funds, 2 years of our funding. And then the fourth would come from these rescinded funds. So that puts us at that. But this is probably one of the only years that we've been able to do that. So that is kind of the concern when we're at that stage and we want to get the fleet healthy and look at different service delivery models. We heard your comments and the goals and the objectives for the COA. That is going to be an area that is looked at and assessed is the vehicle type, the service delivery type on some of these route segments. And I think the approach is, we want us to get it in a healthy state where we can expand services. We're going to get to the point that we're at 20% out of service. We're not going to have a spare capacity when we should be replacing vehicles with 700, 800,000 miles. And our vendor has done a good job. Our ATP Dev has done a really good job with maintenance. There's been no issues. It's just the additional costs associated. And that it's not as reliable and provide consistent service. So that's that tipping point of trying to balance and keep a healthy fleet and continually replacing and being able to retire buses. We haven't retired any buses since I've been here, which is challenging with the Proterra fleet.
Right, totally understand. I guess my question is, if we're calling it a pilot as what recommendation 2 is, and totally understand the need to have a reliable fleet, and we have to retire buses, and we have to continue to invest in that CapEx. And at 35 buses, we should be buying 3 a year every single year if we're going to keep that sustainable once we get healthy. My really question is for the pilot, specifically seeing that recommendation 3 there for that $250K for the mobile pay. My personal opinion is that would be better spent on having a full pilot of the S3 running at consistent timetables. That's going to be easier on the user experience instead of having to remember, oh, it's 8:30 in the morning. Okay, wait, it's coming at this time. Oh, wait, it's 10. I have got 90 minutes now, right? That makes it a harder user experience. That instead of eliminating recommendation 3, pulling in a full S3 run for 6 months, I'm sure we could run the number of miles that is to say, hey, that's taking away a year off a bus or whatever that damage is for that 6-month pilot. But if you look at the S3 numbers, and I know y'all are, for the S3, I mean, we had 12,000 people who rode it last month. Compare that to other routes with even higher frequency, I think we would get a lot of bang for our buck for increasing that S3 frequency on there. And that's a goal. I know that's your all's goal to do it in a healthy way. I know that's all our goal as people who ride the bus, and it's hard to plan around a 90-minute bus. So that's just my opinions on there. Disliking recommendation 3, expanding number 2, and aligned on number 1. Thanks.
Thank you, Kara. Colin?
Yes, thank you, Harvey. I'm going to say I agree and support everything that Amber and Jessica have been saying all this evening. I think more needs to go to fleet replacement and fleet maintenance. And, if we can use some of those funds to buy just spare parts or spare engines to keep this aged fleet running, I think that would be beneficial. I'm concerned that doing a 6-month pilot is not going to have very good results or feedback. Because it's too short of a time and too short of a, 4 additional runs over 6 months. If city council is not committed to doing it for more than 6 months, I don't think it's worth doing it, because this is just basically found money. and that found money should go towards capital or maintenance and trying to expand operations even, for 6 months. When you think that, you're trying to use existing aged fleet and existing staff, and so you're really pulling everything further apart, it just puts everything more at risk of, well, what if we use a bus, another bus goes down? Well, now how's that going to impact when you're trying to do a pilot during that 6-month period? Or what if all of a sudden, you have a shortage of staff? The same thing. It just seems like everything is going to be spread that much thinner. Then I will recommend number 3. It'd be nice to see this, pay system go into the 21st century. I think Jessica indicated that, that recommendation 3 wouldn't necessarily result in driving up ridership, but I think recommendation 3 could help ridership, because a lot of younger, people are more familiar with using mobile pay, and there's a lot of people don't carry a lot of cash anymore. I don't carry a lot of cash anymore, and trying to scrounge up, cash when you need to ride the bus can sometimes be difficult. So, I think it'd be nice to be able to really consider the options for mobile pay and not, having to take a trip to the transit center if you don't need to in order to just get tickets. And finally, Joseph was talking about, it sounded like some other correspondence that hasn't been shared with the whole committee. Is there other correspondence out there? And we got the one letter from that one person, but I didn't remember seeing any other correspondence. So I was kind of confused about where the direction of some of that was going. But
yeah, and so yes, Joseph had sent an email earlier with a question regarding this conversation, this agenda item. I provided a response, and I actually said within that email that I would specifically talk about all the things in that email at this meetings because of the open meetings laws, and we can forward and include in the minutes that whole email chain. But everything that was said tonight is from that conversation as well. Or I won't even call it a conversation. It was just a question and a response. So we'll provide that back and forth.
But yeah, buy more buses, buy some more engines, buy a couple spare parts.
And just to note, we did about a month or 2 ago, we did have to go back, and there was about 300,000 in extra funding that we needed to about 180,000 for bus maintenance, for the maintenance of the old fleet. And then we had overages on paratransit. So we are assuming that we're going to see the same in fiscal year 25. It's running at about 200,000 a year for additional maintenance, and it only escalates as the fleet continues to age. So we do have those needs.
Yeah, I'd be interested in seeing an alternative where it all goes, to try to use that money to maximize buses, the number of buses somehow, with whatever city match can be provided for that. So thanks.
Thank you, Colin. Very interesting. Jessica, did you have anything you want to sum this up with? You or Amber?
No, I just say we really appreciate it. We really appreciate hearing everybody's thoughts. We recognize the the what's the word?
Interest,
the concern, the desire to be involved in the conversation and the decision making process. I think we definitely can make some improvements to that and strides with you guys to be more inclusive earlier on in the conversation. So yes, just want to thank you guys. Really appreciate your feedback. And yeah, Amber, you got anything?
I don't think so. I really appreciate the opportunity, a lot of open discussion and dialogue. We've brought some of these items to you all before, and I really look at moving forward, like November 8th, our retreat, I think would be a really good opportunity for us to kind of do some Transit 101. I know in the agenda, and I wasn't at the planning retreat, I've been out of the office, the planning for that, and Carrie, you can discuss it, but possibly kind of delve more into this funding so you have a better understanding of it, and maybe look at, there's some great reads on, modern transit, kind of what systems, what we're seeing, what's in the industry in terms of some of the initiatives that we're seeing in terms after COVID. A lot of systems are looking at, re-networking, they're looking at different service delivery models, and we're all challenged with funding constraints. So, this is helpful for our upcoming planning retreat, for our retreat.
Okay. Thank you, Jessica, and thank you, Amber. Appreciate that very much. Since we were on that subject, the safety manager, she checked in. Keith, did you want to address her since she's on?
Absolutely. I believe that she is on.
Did she leave? I saw her come on.
I did see Sharice come on. Sharice, if you're available.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
there. Yes. All right. Knew I saw your name on there.
Yes, I'm here. Hi. And I was glad to meet all you all. And hello?
Yes. We can hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for allowing me to join your team. And I hope that I can bring forth some of the change that you guys are looking for and be assistance to my team.
Thank you, Sharice.
Thank you very much, Sharice.
I'm glad you're here joining the team.
Thank you. I look forward to meeting you all.
All right. Sounds good. Okay, moving on down the line from the agenda. S4N1 afternoon one-time performance. Committee members to discuss current issues impacting weekday afternoon trips on the S4 and S1. Colin brought this to the attention. It's been brought up last year. And Colin, did you want to express your opinions of the S4 and the N1 at this time?
Sure, Harvey. This is only hearsay from, well, I would hope be a reputable source. So I haven't researched that if S4 and N1 are connected in the afternoon, but that was what I was told, that S4 does an afternoon route, and that bus then becomes the N1 bus. But the N1 lately has been very unreliable as far as timing goes. Sometimes it's right on time. Sometimes it's 30 minutes late. I frequently find myself at a bus stop trying to explain to other passengers waiting that, yes, the bus is coming, it's just extremely late. And as a result of that, that bus often skips the UNC Asheville loop because they're trying to catch back up and get back on to the shed on time. And so that, I think, creates issues because the consensus is N1 needs to catch back up, so it'll skip the UNCA route because N2 is right on its heels, and N2 can serve anybody waiting on the UNCA loop. Unfortunately, not every, and I don't know all the riders, but I guess there's always a chance that somebody could be waiting at UNCA to catch the N1 bus because the N1 needs to take them where they need to go. And if the N1 bus doesn't do that loop, the N2 bus is not their route. So they're left waiting an additional hour for that bus. So what I was told was this all comes back to S4 being stuck in the rider pickup traffic around Asheville High School, and that the queue of parents waiting to pick up children at Asheville High School is causing the bus to be late because the bus can't and shouldn't cross the WL center line. So the bus is sitting there in the queue of parents, and it just kind of cascades from there. So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but I was hoping that somebody could enlighten on what the situation is and what the alternatives are to correct it. So,
okay. I've had a lengthy conversation with Danielle on this. I think she can go ahead and answer your question.
Yes, that is true, Colin. We do see that the S4 during the 3 o'clock hour does run into congestion with the parent line at Asheville Middle and then again at Asheville High. It is an ongoing thing. As Harvey stated, we did look at this last year. There was some measurements that management or RTP Dev was able to implement to relieve some of it. But we do try to keep the buses on time so that they don't get too far behind when they encounter these pickup lines at these two schools. One of the solutions last year was having the guard up at the top in the back for the pickup line assist the bus in getting around this line of cars. From my understanding, and of course I'll let LaShawn also step in too, we haven't seen that it's more than just those two schools. It has only been at the high school and maybe sometimes at the middle school, depending on what time that S4 bus departs.
Okay.
So that is 3:30. Just so you know.
Yeah. LaShawn, did you want to weigh in on that conversation?
Yeah, that is the same trip, Danielle. So yes, just what she said.
Okay. The bottleneck starts at 2:30 in the afternoon and runs till 4.
That would be safe to say, Harvey.
Correct.
If I can chime in, one, thank you, Danielle and LaShawn, for weighing in and giving those specific details. Committee member Colin, I regret that experience, and I apologize for that experience. A lot of the issues that we have is not necessarily with our manpower and filling service. It does bleed into traffic and congestion. Some of the things that tools that normally are at our expense, we don't have them implemented here. One would have been a service protection buses, or having buses at the alignment where we know that there are going to be bottlenecks. We can insert a bus. We're looking at manpower and equipment issues, some of those topics that we previously had discussed on the agenda. That requires extending manpower. Anytime you use another buses, another operator, or extending time, number of trips, it creates another cost. So we are building up our manpower and we're implementing internal SOPs local to Asheville, but making sure that everything aligns with our corporate policy that will kind of ease that level of congestion. I'm not minimizing your concern, but I do want to share just some things I was able to pull together on the S4. 58% of the latency issues are less than 10 minutes. The 0 minutes early to no more than 5 minutes late, that's the industry standard. That's the standard at primarily the top performing transit agencies. So we pretty much use that across the board. I think that that's good. That 58% is less than 10 minutes, and we wouldn't even take an action with putting an operator back on time for anything less than 10 minutes. You get to your 20-minute mark, 30-minute mark. Now we begin to look at what are some ways to mitigate that service. We will continue to address our supervisory resources, which I am assessing and evaluating. We're looking at how can we get better communications to operators, ensuring that our pullout is monitored, ensuring that the operators are staying on time as much as they can, meaning no delays in schedule. So we do have some things that we're putting in place. It's just taking some time to build up our manpower and then implement these policies. So I regret that experience, but we do take what you've advanced, we take it very personally and very seriously, and we will continue to report back on what we are implementing as we move along, but know that we're trying very hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. Also on that line, the on-time performance is currently factored into that route.
Yes, on-time performance is factored into that route, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Keith.
The S4 specifically is trending at about 58% on time. We were able to decrease the earlies, but everything is now trending into latency issues, with traffic being the number one issue. And then I'm hearing their school trips.
Right. Plus, they're working on some of those streets down that way.
Yes, construction certainly has been an hindrance.
You know, Depot Street down there.
Does it resolve your concern, Committee Member Kenton? Or does that answer your question?
Sounds like there's not a problem.
So you good, Colin?
So it's awesome.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. And thank you, Colin. Okay. Transit Committee retreat. Committee members to discuss retreat planning activity, upcoming retreat, potential date, time frame of the retreat. Kara, did you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, the retreat and staff met last week or 2 weeks ago, and the date is November 8th. We just were working through some of the details, some of our thought processes behind what we put on the same retreat outline that we shared with y'all 2 transit committees ago. Staff is reviewing over that. We put in the request for the various staff presentations, and that was the main summary from the retreat. No big changes, just mostly getting alignment between the outline and staff. And with the we met with the facilitator for the first time, so mostly getting her aligned on that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Sounds good. Thank you, Carol. Okay. Moving on. Colin, do you have anything to add to that? No, I didn't.
No, Harvey.
Oh, okay, thank you. Transit committee member updates and rider experiences. Kara.
Thanks, Harvey. Just wanted to share, obviously I'm talking about the bus with everyone around me. My girlfriend is too. One of the people at her work, he works down off of the S3 route, walks 15 minutes. They work 12-hour shifts, walks 15 minutes, get to the bus stop, waits for the S3. That one's the only one that's right there for the S6 isn't on that corridor. Gets on the bus, rides it up to the station, waits for the 170. The 170 is on a 2-hour long loop. Takes 170 and then walks or bikes back to his house, and he does that every day. It takes him about 2 hours to do that one way. So that's 4 hours of transition time to get to a 12-hour shift. The impact to him is he's had to ask his supervisor to leave work early in order to make some of those bus connections. So just, as we all talk about frequency, and I know we all talk about service, these are just things that I'm hearing. And I know all of y'all are hearing as well, but just kind of want to share that. He specifically had a question about e-bikes, and I know I've been talking to Chris about that, but just want to throw that out, that e-bike on the bus, I think we should, Harvey, I'll send you an email about asking if we can add that to next month's agenda. I know we talked about that 6 months ago, but I think we should relook at that policy of not allowing e-bikes, because that would certainly make his commute a lot better. And I think that would be a really good last mile option. Other transit systems are doing that as well.
Yes.
So that's it for me.
Okay. Thank you, Kara. Are there any other transit experiences, member updates, rider experiences? Okay, Bill. Oh, he said, great point, Kara. Yeah, it is a great point. Anyone else? Okay, I'll try to go through this rather quickly. My voice is giving out on me, so it showed up. The member updates would be Chris and I, we were in a travel training September the 10th, where Chris and I were in attendance. We're on October the 2nd. We're planning our second outing with the seniors. We're trying to go from Deerfield Community on Hendersonville Road to the Publix on Hendersonville Road, and return citizens to Deerfield safe and sound. On September the 13th, I attended the RC meeting in Asheville, of Asheville Regional Transit Coalition, discussed upcoming funding for the city of transit, and discussed microtransit. Mentioned our new art general manager, Keith Sanders. I did. We have a new safety director, Ms. Glenn. I also mentioned that. The route maps I showed to Chris and Danielle a little over a month ago. Those have been implemented down at the transit center, and Danielle was the captain on that, and she sent me a picture of the route maps. They're aligned in a good fashion where the riders can necessarily look at it. They know exactly what they want to get and go where they want to go. They have designated slots for ease of destination location. Also explained transit has looked at, we discussed microtransit in the meeting, and also explained that transit has looked at microtransit circulators, and staff is open to new and all ideas and engaging in microtransit. There's a lot to consider as far as employees, maintenance, pricing, fares, insurance, facility, and to run the business is another thing. But that was my gist on the member updates and meetings that I've been in. Is there anyone else? So Elaine Barnes, go ahead. Elaine?
Yes. One of the things I'd like to find out about is the change related to UNCA students and how the university and transit system has changed this year as far as billing and use of the student ID card as a way to access the bus. Those passes are no longer available to the OLLI students on campus, and that's most OLLI students are of a certain age, shall we say, and those are ones I've been trying to encourage to use the bus to go to class and to go to events on the campus. So I'm interested in what precipitated the change for this year.
Amber, are you through, Elaine? Elaine, are you through?
Yes, I'm through. That's the end of my question.
I thought you might have been like me, had to grab you something to drink.
I can provide a little bit of
Amber
information.
has
I
a
know.
hand up.
Can you hear me? Okay. So in terms of UNC Asheville reached out to us when we were able to get back onto campus about they utilized a sticker, and they're still doing that for the students. They did indicate for the OLLI students that they would, I believe it's in terms of funding cuts that have been associated with what they're seeing on their end. So what they did is I believe they've given the OLLI contact our contact information, and Nicole, maybe you can chime in if you have any more additional information, but we could set OLLI up for a discounted program with their own identifier like what we do, and we could just bill it back to the OLLI program at a discounted rate that we do with our passport program. And we could talk about other avenues depending on if they meet other qualifications. So that has been a change. It was initiated by UNC Asheville, I think, due to their funding constraints that they're seeing currently. And I believe they communicated that with OLLI. We're not part of that communication, and we were not any part in that decision making. They had indicated that they were probably going to discuss it with OLLI.
Thank you.
We're more than happy if there's a contact.
I'll follow up.
We can
later.
sit down with them and give them their options. I think they're limiting it. They're
Thank
providing.
you. I'll
They're
follow up.
limiting their amount of stickers they're providing. They're just trying to be mindful of their budget constraints that they're seeing across the university.
Kara has her hand up.
Certainly,
Nicole.
I understand that. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. Kara and Nicole.
For Amber, Chris, I was using the transit app last weekend and realized that there was a change to it where you can no longer drag your pin to like a future location where you plan on being to see when the last bus is coming. I used to use that, like, let's say I was planning on going into downtown, wanted to make sure I had a game plan for when the last bus was leaving to make sure I would get back into West Asheville at the right time or not get stuck in downtown. And now it says you have to pay and have the upgraded Royal Plus in order to use that. So what that looks like for me is on my phone, I'm having to go onto the website, click on the W2, scroll to the bottom on my phone, scroll, find the last time, back out, get the W6, do the same thing, scroll to the bottom, get the timetable, all of that, where I used to be able to do it in the app. And I don't know what the stop number is from the transit center, or I could Google that and find that up. Mostly it's just less convenient, and I'm being asked to pay for something I didn't used to have to. Has that changed? And yeah, that's really my question.
Oh, well, if this is a charge on the transit app, it would be specifically through the app and the provider, the company that owns that app. So yeah, I think I'm not aware of it. It's not surprising. I think transit app started charging passengers a couple years ago for certain features, and this just may be one further step that they've chosen to move forward with.
You all have a better recommendation for the average rider trying to get that information? It used to be go download the app, like check everything in the app. Is there a better recommendation? It's okay if you don't have it now, but
yeah, I guess so are you looking it up for your stop that you're currently at, like to see all the
like it's 2 p.m. I know I'm going to take the W2 into downtown. I'm trying to figure out, okay, what time do I need to set an alarm on my phone to leave the spot I'm going to be in to make sure I don't miss the last bus. I've got the multiple W buses going into downtown that I can walk less than a mile home. So I'm just trying to check all 3 of them to make sure I get the last possible option. And I can never remember if it's a weekend or a weeknight, which one's running the latest. So then I have to go look up all 3 every time. It just seems like there should be a better way. And it used to be the app.
Yeah, you could
Have you
use to
used
pick on this
Google?
app and it would tell you the stops. Does Google show that? I think Google also shows that at the stop, doesn't it? Which bus comes?
They have a trip planning tool, but also you can it's a little easier to see on your web browser, your PC or something, but the desktop version. Have you used that though before, Kara?
No, I'm almost always on my phone. This is the only time I use
No,
it.
have you used the Google app itself, the Google Maps app?
I haven't tried it for that particular application.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's okay. I don't need an answer now. Just mostly put it on your radar. Something changed. The passenger experience is being asked to pay harder.
And transit, I mean, it was like to upgrade to Transit Royale. I think it occurred a couple of years ago. I think then staff, this was before I started, they were telling people to use Move It, but then I think Move It actually started charging. And I think this is a challenge within the industry. The nice thing, some agencies is they're going to mobile fare payment. They're making these, like, systems are able to promote and pay for and cover the usage of their riders to use the Transit Royale app through a benefit with their mobile fare application. Those are some things to consider. And Chris, I now see systems saying, you know, Transit Royale is included, or we're now offering Transit Royale. I think it would be at a cost to us, but it's something we could look at. But a lot of these apps are now moving to pay per month. I pay for it on mine for the Transit app. Yeah, Colin just said he's getting more plugs to upgrade. And maybe this is something that we could provide some public information on our website and some guidance, and maybe something that we look at for that, just to complement the rider experience. Because I know that we were telling people to go to the Transit app, then it was to Move It, and then Move It started charging. So
great, thank you.
Okay, Colin.
And Colin, I think, you know, maybe we need to have an offline discussion to get a little further in depth in terms of, I was jumping and toggling back and forth because of my connectivity was not good. So I kind of missed the discussion, but it might be beneficial to have Keith and Chris and the team together, and we could just talk about it.
Yeah.
And better understand. And we are seeing issues with school service, but we want to identify and work together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. Thank you. Nicole?
Thank you, Harvey. I wanted to address Ms. Barnes. I apologize for my delay. I was searching for the emails. I had emailed Miss Catherine Frank back in July. They were interested in the passport program, like the UNCA uses for their students and employees. And I emailed her information about the passport program. I have not heard anything back from her.
Okay.
I knew that we got her. I remember. I thought that we had some contact.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Elaine?
And I'll follow up.
And also,
I've talked with Catherine Frank earlier this week, and I think it was a matter of cost, but I will clarify that because there does need to be a response back, so I can check on that. Thank you very much.
oh, no problem. I also spoke to a Miss Lynn, I believe it's Spate, in on August 19th. Um, and we just shared information. We were talking about, if nonprofit, how nonprofits can purchase bus passes, that kind of thing. So we have been in contact. I haven't heard any additional info.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Nicole. All right. Is that it, Elaine?
Yes, that answers my questions. Thank you
Okay.
very much.
Okay. As long as you're satisfied. That's the main point. Appreciate your input very much. There are no more transit committee member updates and rider experiences. We'll move on. I don't see anybody's name up in the queue. Okay. Departmental updates, city staff, monthly transit update memos. Staff will provide update on recent upcoming activities.
To be sensitive of time, I know we're over. We provided the memo. There's not a lot of new information in it. The one thing to be watchful of is that we have received proposals as of 5 p.m. today. I haven't looked at which ones are responsive or whatnot. They'll go through a city process. We will be communicating the developments as they arise. We'll provide updates and give you all the information. As we noted, after selection, we are going to put together a working group with a couple members to look over deliverables as they come in from the consultant. So we are establishing that process. We have to go through our internal process to deem the proposals responsive, and then we'll do an evaluation process. So that is that update. If there's not any additional questions, just to be mindful of time, I'm going to ask that if there's any additional questions on any of the additional staff reports that we've provided. If you don't have any questions, then we won't go over them. I'm going to let Chris talk about ridership, and if there's anything particular about ridership you can ask, or he can go over an overview. I just also want to be very sensitive that we're almost 15 minutes over on our time.
Thank you, Amber. Chris?
Well, I mean, if I'm open to questions if there are any. Just in summary, though, we are continuing to increase in ridership year over year. We're up 13% for the month of August. The chart on the first tab will provide you the totals for each of the routes. Looks like we only had one route that was down, and that was W5. But it looks like the trend is similar to last year, with an increase between July and August. So happy to take your questions if you have any.
Okay, looks like there are none. Okay. All right, Chris, we'll move on. Thanks, Chris. Moving on to operation updates, art staff, art general manager, Keith.
Good evening, Harvey, and I will also be brief. Our on-time performance for the month of August is, and I've only looked at peak, and I only looked at our peak service, AM and PM. We're on time in the AM at 79%. We're on time in the PM at 50%, with 47% being late and 2% being early. Swiftly has observed 69,000 stops for August, which is up 5,000 stops from the July. So we are getting better data inside of Swiftly. The 4 stops where we're having the most issues will be the S3, S4, S2, and the W5. And they're running 69%, 78%, 54%, and 56% respectively late. The S3 and the S4, we looked at the inbound trips, and on the S2 and the W5, it was the outbound trips that were contributing to the latency issues. We are continuing to look at those issues and again deploy our resources as they are available to kind of address these on-time performance concerns. Safety, we've had a 14% decrease in accidents year to date. We've had a 50% decrease in preventable accidents year over year. So last year we were 4.8. This year for our preventable accidents, we are at 4.2 accidents per 100,000 miles. We've completed our Biltmore and Hilliard route hazard analysis, which has yielded great results. We are training bus operators on pedestrian accidents, wheelchair securements, and our seatbelt campaign. Our manpower, we're 3 out of 5 route. We have 3 out of 5 road supervisors, bus operators, 56 out of 59 are active. And with our key personnel, we do have Sharice Glenn, who is our RATP safety manager. She started September the 9th. And our maintenance, preventative maintenance is at 100%. So I want to applaud the maintenance staff for meeting that goal. And that's all that I have. That concludes the GS report for August. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Keith. Okay. If there's nothing else, I know I need to get off, about ready to go. I'll adjourn this meeting. The next meeting will be October 15th, 2024. I appreciate everybody coming out and welcome aboard to the new staff. Everybody have a